Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Brave New Fellows Program Informational Webinar. My name is Mehek Anwar, and I'm the current Outreach Fellow here at Brave New Films. And I'm joined today by Angel, who is the Fellowship Coordinator.
Hello, everyone.
So before we get started, I just want to give everyone a couple of instructions so we can make everything go as smoothly as possible. Um, First of all, if at any point anyone has a question, please feel free to leave it in the chat or the question drop down. I won't be able to answer it immediately, but we'll have a Q&A session at the end where I'll be able to address most, if not all, of the questions you leave. And since you all have been muted, this is the primary way you will get an opportunity to communicate with me and Angel. So feel free to use that chat to ask questions, leave troubleshooting concerns, anything you want to communicate can be done that way. So before we get started, I just want to make sure everyone can hear me and see my slide. So just go ahead and leave a little note in the chat box. And when I start to see those come in, I will go ahead and get started with the presentation today. All right, we have one person who says that they can hear me. All right, cool. All right, they're pouring in. All right, thank you guys. So let's get started. Again, thank you so much for joining us today to learn a little bit more about the program. This is the Brave New Fellows program for the 2018 year and hosted by me. Like I said, I'm a current fellow here, and Angel. So I'm sure all of you have sort of looked over information about the fellowship online. If you haven't, take an opportunity to do that after this webinar or during it. I'm going to go over some things that are some pieces of information that are not necessarily available online, just to give you a little bit of an in-depth look at the program. So let's just get started. The fellowship program is a paid year-long program for communities of color and or economically marginalized communities. The key phrase in that is that it's a year-long program, which means when you commit to it, you are committing to the full year, and that year is January through December, and I'll have more details on specific dates a little bit later. The fellowship program is also a full-time job. You are in our Culver City offices 40 hours a week, which means that this is not appropriate for people who are current students. It's not appropriate to have an additional job with this because, like I said, it is full-time, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the office. And the program is also an opportunity for people from different backgrounds to get involved in film. So you don't have to be coming from a strictly film background for this fellowship to be a good fit for you. You can have a variety of different backgrounds as long as you are interested in film and interested in using documentary film in your work. This fellowship is something that could work out really well for you. So I'll go a little bit into my background just before I go into this next slide. Just to go off that last point actually, is I don't have a particularly heavy background in film. My background is in journalism and publishing and communications, but I've been passionate about using documentaries and using reporting in a visual format to further the way I tell stories, which is how I fall into place in this fellowship program. All right, so let's go into this next slide now. So the fellowship program is not a school. So, it's not like a graduate program. It's not, you're not taking classes. You are receiving on-the-job training, which means you are an integral part of whatever team you're in. But throughout the time you're here, you will be receiving trainings, one-on-ones. You'll have opportunities to learn from the projects you're assigned, which is something that's really unique to this fellowship and something that I have enjoyed a lot. the fellowship program is also not an internship, which means that, like I said earlier, you will have responsibilities for projects within your department. You'll have, autonomy to see a lot of those projects through. So it's more than an internship. It's a full-time job, like I mentioned before. And again, wanna say this point one more time. The fellowship program is not longer or shorter than a year. So, the fellowship is a year-long program. It's not going to overflow into next year, but it's also no shorter than that. So when you make a commitment to the program, that is the period of time you are committing to. And like I said earlier, as you have questions, feel free to submit them, and we will get to them at the end of the webinar. So now I'm going to talk about each position just briefly, specifically. I'll start with talking about the outreach fellowship position, and that is, the photos you're seeing are two current fellows. I'm on the left and Jessica is on the right. We're both outreach fellows. So you can read that little blurb on the page. Some of the major things outreach fellows do are we're responsible for distribution of films within Brave New Films. So that includes building lists and creating potential partnerships for film distribution, sending emails and having follow-up phone calls with community groups and student organizations, assisting with facilitation on events, which has been a really fun thing I've gotten the opportunity to do this year, maintaining the Brave New Educators Facebook page, and designing guides and brochures and infographics. Even though the fellowship in and of itself, the outreach fellowship, is not post-production intensive, it is useful but not necessary to have a little bit of Creative Cloud background. It has come in really handy for me. So the next one I'll talk about is the post-production fellowship. Those are two of our current fellows, Miguel and Michelle. The post-production team is really responsible for overseeing the short films that we create here at Brave New Films. So a lot of the work you'll be doing is, you'll be finding video clips, facts, statistics, and images to use on current projects. You will be, ingesting and organizing footage that you find, producing string outs, creating master clip logs of final cuts. And you'll also be participating in the creative brainstorms of these projects, and offering, your own feedback and knowledge of current trends. And then let's move on to social media. That's our current social media fellow, Claudia. And social media is it's another form of distribution almost. You will be responsible for for engaging people via our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to see our content. A lot of what happens in social media, the fellow creates lots of memes and graphics to go on the Facebook and Instagram pages. You help prepare very short videos for online launches, schedule posts for all of the platforms, and create analytics reports and research and monitor trending topics. So before I move on, I will note that you are absolutely able to apply for more than one of these positions. We max it out at 2, but make sure that if you are applying for 2 separate positions, you are submitting 2 separate applications. So you can't note on one application that you're applying for 2 positions. If you're going to do post-production and social media, you have to go ahead and submit 2 different applications for both of those. All right, moving along. So now I want to talk a little bit about who would be a good fit for this program. We have that listed again on our website, but I want to highlight 3 key factors that we are looking for in our incoming class of fellows. So the first one is obviously whether or not you have an intensive film background. We want someone, we want people who aspire to use film to support their careers or activism, someone who cares about it deeply as a medium, even if that's not your background. We're also looking for people who do have basic skills in the different areas you're applying for. So you don't have to be, an Oscar-winning filmmaker, cinematographer, but having basic knowledge will be really helpful, and we're looking for those foundational skills so that we can help build off them. And then the third feature we're looking for, and this is arguably one of the most important, is that we want the fellows to have a demonstrable commitment to and passion for social justice work and activism. So, there are a lot of different ways that those things are demonstrable, a lot of different ways they can shine through. They might shine through in your writing. If you're coming from a journalism background like me, they might shine through in the topics that you create your films on. They might shine through in the kind of social pages you have managed. So if you are coming from a social justice background, that is a huge benefit for you. And we really want to build a team of young activists and people who care about social justice. So I wanted to give you all a couple tips that I have learned while I've been here that are not necessarily listed anywhere, but I hope you were able to take with you. So we want to make sure, Brave New Films wants to make sure that this fellowship will position you positively for your future career goals. And it would be useful if you try to reflect that in your application. So that way, we get an idea of where you're at right now in your career or in your educational journey and where you want to be, and how Brave New Films can be a stepping stone to help you. It would benefit applicants to sort of talk about that in their applications. The second thing I would say is that the application process will certainly be rigorous, so be prepared to allocate time to it throughout August. And that means, I'll share a timeline with you after the slide, but that means while we are in our interview and second, third round phases, you almost need to be on call to be participating in those subsequent rounds of the application. So the first round is this first application that you will submit, and then there will be more to come after that. And then the third tip I want to give to everyone who is out of state or not in the area is, before you get to LA, definitely do your research on the city. Rent prices here are pretty expensive, and commutes can be really long since it is a huge, really spread out city. So, that's something to be thinking about as you're applying for this fellowship, and sort of looking at rental costs here, looking at different areas. We are located in Culver City, so, planning your commutes and your housing around that would be useful. It is a very car-heavy city, so most people have cars out here, but you can definitely make do with public transportation and biking if you live close enough. So those are just some tips from me. Let's move on to the timeline. So on June 12th, as you know, our application process opened, and then on August 4th, the completed applications are due by 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that is coming right up. Today is July 19th, so you have a little bit more time. Between now and August 4th, the fellows will host a Facebook Live with a little bit more information in case you need, just that extra boost to get your application finished, and that will be at the beginning of August. But concretely, applications are due August 4th. And then, as you can see on the calendar, August is a pretty intense month for follow-ups on these applications. So on the 9th and the 10th, candidates who make it to the second round will be notified of that. Around mid-August, your second round task will be due. And then after that, there will be phone interviews on the 16th, 17th, and the 18th. And then at the very end of August, outside panelists will be reviewing candidates and selecting finalists. So all of the selection will happen at the end of August, and then from the beginning to the mid September dates, finalists will be contacted, final interviews will happen, and we will lock in our 5 fellows for next year. And then the program will officially begin on January 8th, 2018. And in case you want an exact time frame for the program next year, it begins on January 8th and it ends on December 21st. So this timeline is available online, and there will be a recording of this webinar after it's over, so you will be able to look over these slides as well. And so that was the timeline of the application. If you are accepted into the fellowship program, I just wanted to go over the timeline of the program. So from January to mid-October, so that's the bulk of the year, you will be placed in your concentration area. So let's say you applied to be a post-production fellow, you became the post-production fellow, you will be in post-production from January through mid-October. The fellowship program is a rotational program, which means you do get a taste of what it's like to be in each department. And so mid-October to mid-November, you will move from your concentration area into your first rotation. So if you are a post-production fellow, you may move into social for that first rotation, and then you may move into outreach for that second rotation. The rotations only last for about a month, so that does mean, you know, they're not as much of a focus as what you applied for and what you showed interest in. Great. So, Angel, do you have anything to add?
I just wanted to add that this is a pretty competitive fellowship. Just so you know, in the first year we had 500 applications, and we always select 5. In the second year we had 300 applications. So I would also add, the earlier you get in your application, the better, for a lot of reasons. So if you are able to get them in pretty quick, that's to your advantage.
Okay, great. So we're just going to go over some questions you all have. I'll go over some of the ones that were submitted in the questions box, and then a couple others that were emailed to me. Feel free to keep putting your questions in as I'm talking. So we have a question, do the post-production fellows use Adobe or Avid? That's a good question. We at Brave New Films use Adobe Premiere, and we use Adobe Creative Cloud for all the projects that happen. So familiarity with any editing software is good, but specifically with Premiere will give you a little bit of an advantage. If you are in social media, you will definitely be using Photoshop or Illustrator. And I have also used Photoshop in design and Premiere in outreach, though in outreach that is not a necessary skill for you to come with. Second question, is this fellowship, especially the post-production side of things, specifically for people with more or less experience in video production?
That's a good question. You know, it's really, if you have, as Mehek pointed out, if you have basic skills, that's great. That's the best place to be. It's not a fellowship for someone that has no skills, because as Mehek pointed out, this is not a school. There won't be classes on how to use Premiere or anything like that. In the same vein, it's also not a fellowship for someone who has extensive experience. May have worked for years with a production company, and is maybe a narrative production company and now wants to switch over to documentary. It's really not a fellowship for that type of person either. It's really for someone who is has some experience, is starting out, because it's really the intention of it is to give people who are starting out an opportunity to gain some more experience and build on the experience that they already have. Hope that answers your question.
Cool. And then let's go to, all right. And then for the question, when do applicants receive a decision by? That is, you can refer to the calendar. That will be in September, and the specific dates are on the calendar. Another question is, for the application process for outreach, I know we have to present a presentation discussing the film we choose. Does this involve an actual presentation with slides? That's a really good question. It does not. You can actually just, you can incorporate slides if you'd like, but you don't have to. You can just do face to camera and talk about, discuss, have your discussion that way. It doesn't have to be anything edited in any fancy way. You can just record yourself talking and submit that.
Right. The point of it is to see your presentation style and skills, really, to see you on camera giving a presentation. One thing I want to add here, just in terms of both the video that outreach applicants will submit and post-production folks will submit, you want to keep it to the time limits. We won't watch anything over the time limit, and I need to look at the time limits again, but I think it's nothing more than 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes.
So another question is, so is Final Cut frowned upon? Would it be in my best interest to start getting familiar with Premiere before the fellowship begins? That's a good question. Final Cut is not necessarily frowned upon. It's just not used. Fellows will not really have the option to use a different editing software here because we have and pay for Adobe, and that's, systemized. Everyone is using that, so workflow is better that way. If you are applying for the post-production fellowship, I would say that if you are able to access Premiere before the fellowship begins, I would recommend familiarizing yourself with it a little bit. In my opinion, it's actually an easier software than Final Cut. It's a little more intuitive, so you shouldn't have too hard of a time. But yes, I would say if you are able to access Premiere, even if you can't use the actual software because of cost barriers or whatever, you can watch YouTube videos, and that will give you an idea. All right, so another question that was submitted is, for the post-production fellowship, how many short films do we get to work on? That's a good question, thank you. So it sort of depends on how you define work on. Almost everything that you do in post is work towards a short, which is really cool because it means that you had an impact in every short that comes out of the organization. The kind of work that is done from short to short will greatly vary depending on what you are able to bring and depending on the needs of the head of production, whose name is Tara. So sometimes it might mean you are pulling clips. Sometimes it might mean you're doing research. Other times you might have your hands a little deeper in a short. You might be one of the primary people editing. You might be giving notes. You might be shooting the footage on location. It really depends on the assignment and
your strengths and skills.
Absolutely. And I also want to add on that is, if you ever, and this goes for every fellow in every different position, if you ever feel that there is a project that you want to take on that is appropriate for the current what is currently being worked on in your department, don't be afraid to pitch it, and pitch it in a way where you have a plan and you have a proposal, and that, you know, for example, if you're in post-production and you say, I want to do this on this short, it's not always guaranteed that it will work out that way, but it is a really good way to let the head of production know where you're at in terms of what you want to do.
And I just want to add there that when she says pitch, it means pitch on doing something on a project that's already happening, not pitching new projects necessarily. I mean, there's room for that, but not as much room as, you know, saying, I want to be involved in this project in this way. This project's already going on in this way.
Great. There's another application question, which is, at what point do our references get called?
Yeah, your references will get called if you get into the final round.
And I'll scroll down here. It says, could you go over again what we can expect in the Facebook Live video? You mentioned submitting earlier is to our advantage, but also that there will be a FB Live video in early August. That's a really, really good question. So I would say submitting earlier is better. I would prioritize early submission over the Facebook Live video because you know, a lot of it will be we'll be going over similar things. The difference in the video may be that there will be more fellows talking about their experiences from all over the organization, so from post-production, from social media. You'll get to hear different perspectives. So if that's something that's important to you, you know, you can definitely stay tuned for the Facebook Live video and finish the bulk of your application, and then just plug in whatever you learn from that as appropriate. But again, submitting late is not actually going to, it's not actually going to necessarily harm your chances of being accepted. It's just something that we prefer to get your name and your application in front of someone as early as possible. Cool. And then the question is, can you tell us more about the second round of the application process?
So once you're notified that you've gone to the second round, you'll get a task to complete, and that task will need to be completed in a tight time frame. So let me give an example. So for the outreach fellowship last year, Mehek, you know, was notified that she's in the second round. We gave her an assignment on researching, what was it that you researched?
Sports stadium funding.
Sports stadium funding, because that was going to potentially be one of the shorts we were doing. So in outreach and research, those fellows are responsible for doing that kind of pre-production research. So she had to put together, I can't remember it now. She had to put together a research document with points that needed to be covered and key information.
Yeah, so it'll be something that is, you know, like I was saying earlier, it'll be it'll be rigorous, and it will be something that you should definitely keep your eye out for. You know.
So I'm sorry, the post-production fellow in the second round, the post-production applicants in the second round had to create a video, a 3-minute, I think it was, no, it's not 3 minutes, like 1 minute, 2-minute video based, pulling together footage that we provided. So it was just, it was an editing task. Sorry.
And so it won't necessarily be the same exact tasks this year, but that's just to give you an idea of what happened last year. Next question is there an age limit?
No age limit. On the younger end, you have to at least be out of high school. On the upper end, there's no age limit.
Cool. And then there was a question submitted in the link that I provided in your confirmation emails, which was, how has the work culture at Brave New Films impacted your development both professionally and as a person? So I'll speak to that a little bit. The organization it's a small, tightly knit organization. There's 20 something people at any given time, 22 to 26. So in terms of development professionally, it has given me a lot of insight, especially in outreach, on interdepartmental communication, on how to make a project run with, 9 different people working on 9 different things, how to delegate tasks, and how to time manage. And then obviously, personally, when you are learning all these methods of communication and time management at work, definitely also pours into, personal projects and what you do outside of the workplace. Another important question I wanted to address was, if a person wants to work in Hollywood, is this the right place to start? Really want to stress that question. And in a nutshell, the answer is no. We, do not run like a Hollywood traditional for-profit production company. We are a nonprofit, and the content we work on is very specific. It's social justice oriented. Our films are documentaries. They range from shorts to features, so there's flexibility there. But other than that, we do not consider ourselves to be part of the Hollywood machine. Can students currently enrolled in school apply? That's another good question, and the answer is no. Like I said, it's a 40-hour-a-week full-time job. If you're a student in college, you have classes, other workloads and commitments, and it is not available to people who are still students and have not graduated. And then let's see. I have one more question here. If you have a current job, can you apply? So you can apply if you currently have a job, but you have to make sure to transition out of that job by January 8th. So that means putting in, appropriate notices, letting people know, that you're transitioning out. So as of now, July 19th, if you have a job, that's okay. Make sure that you don't have a job coming into this, because this will be the new job that you transition into. So another question I want to address is a question that we get pretty often, and that is, will I get to be on set? And that pertains specifically to the post-production fellows. So I'll say again, we're not really a traditional production company in that sense, which means we are not constantly filming things. We have a small studio, but and there might be 1 or 2 opportunities for you to work as part of a production, but this is not a on-set kind of fellowship. That's why we call it the post-production fellowship. Is a lot of the work you do is post. That being said, there is definitely a possibility for you to be on location shoots, and then there are exceptions here and there, depending on the kind of content we're creating, of you to go on a shoot, which are always exciting opportunities when they come up, but nothing necessarily to count on from the fellowship. So another question, for someone who wants to become a documentary filmmaker, what are some of the advantages that the fellowship offers? That's a good question. So we are a documentary film company, so that in and of itself is an advantage. You get to see the workflow that takes place, and the workflow that takes place, and the work that is put in to creating a documentary from its inception all the way to its distribution. So you'll be part of brainstorms, and then you'll actually be working on the assignments, and then you will see how they are disseminated to the world, whether that's through outreach or through social media. So you really get a beginning to end documentary experience. we work on a lot of different shorts, and every short has a different process in which it is brought to life and disseminated. So you will get to see a lot of different ways people respond to documentaries and create documentaries and distribute documentaries. So I would say it's one of the perfect places to be if you care about social justice and you care about documentaries.
Yeah, I don't know if you said this, but we do have several documentary filmmakers who come in and speak to staff and sometimes just to fellows. So there are opportunities to hear from other documentary filmmakers too.
Cool. So another question is for the post-production fellowship, when shooting on location, do you provide equipment or should we have our own? That's a good question. We have our own fleet of equipment. You are not expected to come to this fellowship with I mean, if you have equipment of your own, it's awesome that you have equipment of your own, but we do not expect you to need any for this or for you to bring it into the workplace. We have all sorts of equipment. We just bought a drone, so we're keeping up with the times. We will provide that all here, and you will get the opportunity to use it all, and you will be trained on it as well. So for the cameras that we might have that you're not familiar with, post-production fellows are trained in depth, and all the other fellows are actually also trained in the camera equipment, which is just a little perk. All right, cool. So we have 10-ish minutes left. I have a couple more questions to go over. Oh, looks like we just got another one. Do you know anything about what past fellows have gone on to do after completing their fellowship at Brave New Films? Awesome, awesome question.
Very good question. Yes. So last year, we started off with 5 fellows. In the middle of the program, which was not perfect, one of the fellows left to go on to do graduate school. That was not something that, and that's why we stress that you're making a year-long commitment. We don't want you to leave in the middle of the fellowship. But anyways, so he left. So there were 4 fellows. One fellow ended up being employed here at Brave New Films. She's our social media manager. Another fellow went on to work at PETA, and he does social media video content. We have another fellow who works at the Young Turks, he does both editing and shooting. And then we have another fellow who got accepted as a Soros Justice Fellow, and he's working on a film project at an organization called Endelon. It's an immigrant rights organization.
Another question is, will the fellowship allow us the opportunity to travel, or are we always in the office? Another good question. You will not be doing any major traveling. The travel that is included in almost every department is local. So for example, for social media, if there is a protest that is pertinent to one of our issue areas, you may go do a Facebook Live if that's happening in downtown Los Angeles. If you are in post-production, you may go to a shoot somewhere within the city or within the area. If you are in outreach, I have gone to a lot of tabling events at, I did one for the Women's March. I did one for a internship fair at a community college. I've spoken at a couple different places about our films and done educational materials around those. So locally, you will definitely get a chance here and there to leave the office, but nothing out of Southern California, most likely, nothing outside of Los Angeles, most likely. So another question, so sorry, I was just glancing at my notes here, is will housing be provided? So we do not provide housing through Brave New Films. However, we are able to provide you with like a list of areas and general rent prices in those areas. Um, the fellows are also, we're all individually available to be contacted about those kinds of things. For the fellows who are accepted, I know I am more than happy to chat with anyone and everyone about what it's like living here, and where to look and where to find reasonable rent and how to get places. I'm sure the other fellows will also be able to assist in that, but we don't personally provide housing. So, another question. You mentioned that we should not have another job during the fellowship. Will working on a personal project be an issue?
I mean, if you do it outside of the normal, office hours, if you are here from 9 to 6 and work on your personal documentary project after hours or on the weekends, I don't think that that should be a problem. We had a fellow last year who did that, and he did it pretty successfully.
Okay, great. So, um, we have 5 more minutes if anyone wants to squeeze in a very, very last minute question. But other than that, I think we have addressed what you all have left, and I've addressed some of the ones that were sent in. Um, so, after this, like I said, this will be recorded, and if you need to go back through something, feel free to do that. A lot of this information is online, and applications are up until August 4th if you have not already applied. Angel, is there anything you want to add?
No, just that I'm looking forward to seeing your applications.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone.